Hey, this is H1. We're going to be running it back with another episode talking about chess with chess understanding today. And I want to share with you on how to spot weaknesses in chess. And this is a tip that I want to give beginners first before we start this video talking about specific weaknesses. Hey, your opponent is human, and in order for you to spot a weakness, you have to be alert to weaknesses in real time. You got to be comfortable enough to say, oh snap, that position that my opponent has, oh, that's trash. I need to focus on that weakness so that I can win this game. That's the type of thinking that you have to be on in order to play chess, because you are playing other humans and those other humans is gonna make mistakes. Have you ever played a game before and then you realize the after analysis where you find out, oh snap, they was making mistake after mistake after mistake, inaccuracy after inaccuracy after inaccuracy. They was doing all these things and you didn't spot anything because you thought that they was perfect and they knew better. But no, they don't. They don't know better. I don't care who you're facing. You need to realize that, hey, they're gonna mess up in the game. They're gonna mess up in the game. They can't play 50 moves without messing up at least once. You know, you're not facing Magnus Carlsen each and every time. So, what weaknesses should you be spotting in chess? Well, there could be like a weak pawn structure. There could be weak pieces, and by weak pieces, they could be behind in development, or their pieces don't have active squares to go to. And speaking about squares, there could be weak squares, good outpost for your pieces to be on to get more space into the position, or they can have weak lines. For example, they can have weak ranks, weak files in the position that you could be controlling, in the position. All right, you can win just by a weak file, weirdly enough. Another weakness that your opponent can have is that they can have a weak king. Now, what is a weak king exactly? Is when your opponent forgets to castle, which I be telling you all the time. You cannot play the game of chess without getting your king into safety, and castling is one of those main things. And even if they castle, they can still have a weak king if the pawns is pushed up in front of that king. There's too many squares and lines to attack that king, all right? So that is a major weakness that you have to keep in mind every single time. In this game, this demonstration that I'm going to be showing you right now, we're going to see a grandmaster destroy the opponent by the weaknesses that they have in their position. All right, let's get started. Let's get the board up. Okay, let me show you an example on how to spot weaknesses in chess. And we got this game here. We are going to be the white side. Let me get my stick. We are going to be the white side in this position, and our opponent's going to be the black side. And it actually started off with this move d4. Mamedyarov played the move d4. Both of these guys are grandmasters. g6 in this position was played, and after g6 they want to fianchetto the bishop by going bishop to g7. They're going to be playing a hyper modern type of system, and we're going to be playing a classical type of opening. What is the difference? Well, hyper modern openings, they're going to counterattack in the center earlier on in the game, but a classical opening is when we attack the center immediately. And the center squares are e4, e5, d4, d5 in this position. Now, after g6, e4, bishop to g7 in this position, and then we have the move knight to f3. Just developing pieces, which you should be doing in the opening. Developing pieces, get the king to safety, etc. Now, after a6, a4 here, and then we have this next move, d6. Now, with this move d6, the opponent might be planning on doing this move c5 and e5 very soon, or earlier on after they castle the king, develop the knight, and etc. This is what I mean by hyper-modern opening, when you avoid attacking the center until we get into the middle game. Now, after this move, bishop to c4 in this position, and you already know that bishop on c4 is targeting that pawn on f7. A lot of beginners have fell victim to the pawn being attacked on f7, or sacrifices being done on that square. Maybe get checkmated. I know a lot of you players still get checkmated with Scholar's Mate. If you still do that, go watch that video. Now, after knight to f6, attacking this pawn on e4, queen to e2 in this position, and then we have the next move, c6. After c6, it is kind of weird because 4 pawns were pushed in this position, and the engines hate pawns being pushed so readily, especially in the opening, because pieces should be developed. And so, yes, engines favor classical type of openings. But c6, maybe the queen wants to go to b6, a5 for the future, you never know. Or they might be changing their mind by pushing up d5. It is a very flexible position to do. It is a very flexible option when you are playing chess in the opening. Now, after queen e2, c6, e5, this is a threat. This is a forcing move, the first one. Now, this threat is threatening the knight on f6. The knight on f6 has to move. You can't just castle kingside because, you know, the pawn is less than a knight, and if we capture your knight, they're going to be down in material. That knight has to move somewhere. That knight has to move somewhere, and it moves to d5 in this position, which is in the center. It's a good square. After knight to d5, h3, which if you want to get out of this pin along this diagonal, why not make sure that this bishop never hits the square on g4? And that's what he did. That's why he did the move h3 in this position, so he doesn't have to deal with this pin or this knight being captured on the f3 square. Now, after h3, kingside castle in this position, because king safety is utmost important. And then we have the next moves here, knight to c7. Knight to c7 and c3. And now we got this long pawn chain. Now, the thing about pawn chains that I like so much is that it directs you on which way that you should be attacking. And since the pawn chain is pointed to the king side, we should be attacking on the king side. So if we got moves like d5 that locks up the position in the center, yeah, we already know our next plan should be like trying to get this f pawn pushed up to do a massive attack on the king. That's over here on this side. King side, queen side, king side, queen side, okay? So after this move c3, b5, they're finally getting space on the queen side, which is good because their pieces were looking a little bit cramped, and it actually still does. There's not really any coordination that is being done here. This knight can't even develop happily, and this bishop, you don't ever know where that bishop is going since we did the move h3. b5, bishop to d3 in this position, and then we have the next move, b takes on a4. B takes on a4 is kind of weird because they are doubling up the pawns on the a file, but there's really not that much to do. That rook, if you think about it, that rook on the a file was pinning that a6 pawn, and so white could potentially put more pressure on that b5 pawn to capture it and utilize that pin along the a file. Now, after b takes on a4, rook takes on a4, putting more pressure on this pawn, and that's a weak pawn. Remember that. I talked about weak pawns in the beginning of this video. That's a weak pawn because it's isolated, and there's a lot of pressure on this piece. Black is going to have to deal with that for the rest of their time playing this game. Now, that's one weakness though. It usually takes two weaknesses to destroy the opponent, just to let you know, and that's a more complicated a principle that I do want to talk about on this channel. If you want me to talk about the principle of two weaknesses, hey, let me know in the comments. Now, after c5, they're trying to destroy this center that we have here. Like I said before, they're either going to do like the move c5 or e5. They can't do e5 anymore, so c5 to destroy the center and hopefully get their pieces energetic and activated, because having weak pieces is horrible. That's a big weakness. If we have the most energetic pieces and our opponent still has all their pieces beyond the 7th rank, behind the 7th rank, that's really bad for them. It is gonna show, and Mamedyarov is gonna showcase that. After c5, d takes on c5, d takes on c5, and then we have this next move, rook to d1. Already problems in this position because now the rook is on d1 on the same file as their queen. They're going to have to do something about their queen being on d8. They're going to have to block this file. They're going to have to block this file, or they're going to have to move the queen to e8 in this position, which they did. They moved the queen to e8, and this is a threat on our rook on a4. Do not forget to ask yourself the question, what is my opponent's threat? Because if you forget to do that, you're going to lose. You're going to lose the chess. And if you're not asking that at all, start today, because you're not playing chess. You're not going to get there. You're not going to improve, get that rating up if you're not. Now, after queen to e8, attacking the rook, notice this move. And let me just tell you right now, this game ends in the next 4 moves because of rook to h4. Rook to h4. Very devastating. Why is that? Well, there's a few weaknesses here. Their pawn structure is very weak. They have all their pieces on the queen side, and so now we can attack on the king side. And then plus, in the future, you're going to see a weak king. What is that exactly? Well, after rook to h4, a5 doesn't do anything, but you get the purpose, right? They want to exchange pieces with moves like a bishop to a6, knight to g5, and now they're gonna have a weak king, a weak pawn structure. They already got weak pieces because they're not doing nothing. Of course, you know, their pieces aren't gonna be weak for long, so we're gonna have to be in a hurry to take initiative in the position to force them to defend themselves instead of like be activated. We don't want to give our opponent moves like bishop to a6 with, let's say we did a slow move like b3. Our opponent can come back into the position and we won't have this attack anymore. But after knight to g5, we are forcing our opponent to respond to this because we want to do knight takes on h7 and then take this rook and eventually win the game up a full piece. Now, after knight to g5, h6 in this position, attacking a knight, and then after h6, knight to e4, knight is centralized. Our pieces are doing way better than our opponent's pieces. And our pieces are on awesome squares, all right? We're controlling awesome squares. Knight on e4. Bishop could go to c4 to attack the king on g8. The rook is on h4, targeting this h-pawn, and which is forcing our opponent. Knight to e4 wasn't just moving the knight to a great square, but it's forcing our opponent to respond to what happens after bishop takes on h6. This is a major threat. Still threatening things while moving back. That's pro chess right there. That's how you become a professional chess player. And then after this move, h5 in this position, then we have knight to g3, and finally, knight to e6. Pretty much the only piece that's activated. You could say that this bishop might be activated here. This bishop is keeping tabs on this pawn on e5, but it's no active squares. That bishop really isn't doing anything because of this pawn on e5 that we pushed very early on. And the only piece that is really good in their position is this knight. All the other pieces are trash. Just like, look at this rook on a8. We can attack the rook. We can not do our plan and attack the rook with moves like a bishop to e4, queen f3. But no, we want to attack the king. The weak pawn structure, the weak pieces led up to a weak king, especially after this last move, knight takes on h5. After knight takes on h5, black resign because taking that knight is lethal. I mean, if you take the knight, queen takes on h5, game over. So they can't take the knight, and they have to do a sorry move like like knight to c6, ignoring the knight altogether, and then we can take their bishop. And yeah, after taking the bishop, the attack still goes. The attack still goes. What we got here? Knight takes on g7. Knight takes on g7, and then look at here. Look at this position right now. Knight takes on g7, queen to e3, attacking the pawn and threatening queen to h6. This is losing. This is done because of all these weak squares in front of the king, and they only push the h-pawn. And so hopefully this is a good example on how to spot weaknesses in your own games. I know it's really hard, but you're gonna have to think of these type of plans when you're playing chess, all right? Keep on fighting till the end. Wait a minute. All right, keep on fighting till the end, staying focused in chess and in real life too. And then plus, make sure that you like and subscribe and tell me what content that you want next in the comments.